Okay. It's Monday at 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast. And I guess I'm such an East Coaster now. I don't know why I always start with the East Coast. Like that's so
Oh, such an
I'm
East
such a
Coast guy.
West Coastian, I guess, or a West Coastist. Even though I lived there on the West Coast for 20 some odd years. In any
In,
case, it's the weekly Calamity Jane live stream, and we are getting more and more awful at these intros. I am every week, but welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you as always. James, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I was gonna just chime in and say that yeah, you are showing a in the sports world, like I think with ESPN and stuff, they call it an East Coast bias,
An
and I
East Coast bias. That's fair.
yes, and I
That's
think
fair.
definitely for you, you are falling into that. But it's okay. I don't. I mean, I'm looking at it from a linear point of view for time. I mean,
Well, I
you are
mean,
ahead of me, so therefore you get to, you know,
yeah, I mean, I'm a man of two worlds. I turned 40 in June, and I lived for about 20 years on the West Coast, which means I lived for about 20 years on the East Coast. So I've literally split my time in half, split it in half.
hmm.
So
And with that splitting in time of half, do you feel like you have two distinct versions of experiences because of the halvesies?
well, I think my experience on the East Coast is far more limited
Mm,
because I lived all up and down the West Coast, Seattle and
yeah,
LA, and
yeah.
spent a huge amount of time in Portland as well, which I think are that's the three places for me. I guess San Francisco's a thing, but who cares?
Mhm, mhm,
West Coastist here coming out, but on the
mhm.
East Coast, I've only ever lived in Atlanta, so I've
Okay,
visited all up and down the East Coast, but the only place I've ever lived for any significant amount of time is the Atlanta area. So my East
gotcha.
Coast experience is more narrowly tailored than my West Coast experience.
Well, I'm gonna roll into sharing my screen
Let's
and
do
start.
it. Let's do it. And my weekly forgetting to set everything up is
No, that's fun. It's part of
it's
the
it is
rhythm.
it's now it's like if I don't do it, I feel like there's something has gone wrong, horribly wrong.
But there's something. Okay, I mean, we'll talk about this in a second. I'm just kind of getting some things set up.
Okay.
But you were mentioning you're on the East Coast, but yet you are in Georgia. So that's considered South. So what is it? South or East, or East South, or Southeast, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, it's considered the southeast, but
Okay.
I think generally when people say East Coast, they mean probably DC and up.
Okay.
You know, um, uh, but I mean, I am on the east coast of the country. Like the nearest ocean to me right now is the Atlantic Ocean, as opposed to the Pacific Ocean.
Hmm.
Um, so close enough for government work, I guess. But
Okay.
honestly, if we're gonna start splitting hairs about regional regional nomenclature, then this is a podcast is
Yeah, it's
is
gonna. Yeah,
definitely gone off the rails, even by our standards.
I thoroughly enjoy going off the rails myself. That's where I feel the most comfortable when there's
that's
chaos all over the place.
that's true. That's true. I think we talked about this. Maybe we did. Stop me if we did. But over the course of December, I was in that play, and it was just an absolute whirlwind. How busy I was. But the funny thing is that like once I got into that rhythm of stress, it actually felt really normal
Mhm.
and the most normal I have felt in quite a while. Being that busy and having something that focused and um, now that that's all past and the move is settled and the world is sort of calmed down to a certain extent, I'm finding myself a little unfocused. Actually, it's really
Oh,
interesting how that works.
yeah. Uh, I mean, obviously, I completely. I mean, I'm with you on. It's there's some sort of a weird comfort in being overly busy and then kind of having and it results in chaos. But it's actually to me better than being less busy, I guess. So that's kind of where you're settling now. But it'll still be busy for you once you kind of get in your rhythm. Now you're
Yeah,
once a little bit, But I mean, for anybody who happens to be watching, or the ones to tens of people that watch, I think definitely working on something, um, especially during this pandemic and the negative, the news that's always coming out.
uh,
Sometimes you need to kind of just have some sort of project, but you can where you control something where you don't you can kind of this is how I'm playing therapist now right now here on our stream. think it's really helpful. It actually kind of helps, to give your brain a break from getting caught up in anxieties of the real life that's happening outside of your doors. Hopefully, people are, you're healthy as you watch the stream, and you're doing just fine. But it's at least for me, I get caught up in it. Sometimes we have the news on here during the day, kind of checking in, and it's here on the West Coast. It's pretty bad in California right now, but you know what?
Yeah, I always know that I've consumed too much of the world when I can feel my anger rising.
Oh,
Um, like the angrier I am, it's like okay, it's time for a break
yeah,
because
yeah.
so
Um,
yeah so to change the topic slightly, or
mhm.
should I say to get more on topic, what are you doing right now? I have a guess. It seems like you're putting together our crowd lineup.
I am attempting to do that right now. I thought I'd change it up again because as we were talking on our own meeting we have on the weekends,
Right, right.
I had a rhythm going with the walk cycle, and that's fine. I put that on the shelf, and I'll come back to it in a little bit. But I also kind of want to just change gears a little bit, have something else to kind of revisit. And so now I'm doing the lineup, just kind of getting a feel for how our world's kind of shaping together as far as people that live in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of do a tally and see kind of where we're at. Kind of get a feel for it. And if you notice, I've done a couple of different passes on townspeople before. You see here in frame one, there's one line up here, and then in the animatic, I also had this line up here,
Mm-hmm.
which has some of our other regulars as well. But look at this version of
Molly and
Wanda.
Wanda.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, different she looks here compared to here. Now I went and here I went with this version. I don't know. I like the juxtaposition of both characters on this version compared to this. Um, I don't know why. I just wanted to kind of pick with something a little bit more.
I like the difference in their heights more
Yeah,
in the way the direction that you did go with.
yeah, and I echo that too. I like the fact that they're almost kind of opposites a little bit as far as shape, and you can see it visually.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, as much as I don't mind this style, this attempt, and as you can see, Wanda pretty much stayed pretty much the same.
Sure.
Um, uh, I decided to go, yeah, just like what you said. Intuitively, it just felt better to kind of push shapes, and so I think as I work on the townsfolk, I'm always going to try to be pushing shapes to kind of get more abstraction on stuff sometimes, rather than not. Now, John Boy is completely different. I still need to have a lot of work to do on this guy,
He's
but
missing an eyebrow even.
yeah, he's even missing an eyebrow. Like I remember, like when you're trying to imitate somebody in real life, it's a whole other ball of wax to kind of get them to because you're fighting with, does it look like him? Does it not? Is it abstract enough to fit in the show? So I'm kind of having that battle quite a
Well,
bit.
I will tell you, since John Boy is my personal obsession,
Hmm.
I am giving you permission to not overstress about that.
That's helpful. That's good to
Yeah,
know.
I'm not going to be personally offended if someone watching the show doesn't go, "Hey, wait a second, he's from the Waltons," right? Like I'm not gonna, it's not gonna bother me. Or wait a second, isn't that the guy from the Americans? Right? I'll be fine if that doesn't occur.
Yeah, but I think the fact that we've called him John Boy, I kind of want to get. It's me. It's more of a personal thing for me, like chasing that PS4 trophy on Neo 2 or something.
Okay, all
I
right.
still do it, and it is annoying, but I'll get through it. I mean, it's no big deal. I just need to spend more time. It's just again, it's the same old thing. It's just time needs to be spent on him, and I will.
Sure.
I'll get back to him. But there are other interesting characters here that I've kind of done a couple of times. Like
Yeah.
I think I call this guy Hector.
Uh
This
huh.
guy Pancho. He's shown up both times, like little iterations.
I much prefer the more modern version,
This
honestly.
guy here.
Yeah, yeah. He looks
Yeah.
less like a piece of flan with a sombrero in the new one. He looks a little bit cooler.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna. I mean, I will do a version of him. I mean, I can start blocking these guys out.
Yeah.
I have a skater dude. I don't know why I put a skater dude in here.
I love the skater dude. I want to know
The guy can
everything there is to know about the skater dude.
like. A part of me wants to turn this guy into a Silicon Valley guy that takes a scooter and scoots around the hallways.
Well, and
You know,
like, and he's like scouting out Dry Gulch Gorge to set up a data farm out in
or
the
maybe
deserts.
yeah, he is in Drive Gulp Gorge and he doesn't know how to leave either. Like I don't know whether we want.
Maybe he's also like Eurotrash, who is on his gap year, right? And he's wandering around the deserts, and he just happens to stumble into Dry Gulp Gorge and just never leaves. Because that's the thing. To a certain extent, Dry Gulp Gorge is kind of like the Hotel California, right? Like
Yes.
you check in, but you can never check out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's a great metaphor for Dry Gulp.
it's a little bit of a happier place than Hotel California, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
People don't leave because there's just so much to do in Dry Gulp Gorge.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
nonetheless,
is there a tourist type of place or a center
you'd
that
think
advertises this
you
stuff?
would think that they would have like a bureau of tourism in Dry Gulp Gorge, but I don't think they get their act together well enough. Frankly,
Hmm. Okay.
for several reasons. Yeah, but
Uh,
maybe that's like an episode where Mitchell decides that they need more tourism, and he like tries to start a campaign, and the whole episode is like. And I'm just spitballing here, but usually and this would be more of an ensemble episode, and the show is mostly about Calamity, but
yeah.
ensemble episodes are fun from time to time,
Hmm.
and it would be one of those episodes where he gets everybody completely bought in on this idea of putting together a tourism brochure for Dry Gulp Gorge, right?
And as far as motivation, the reason why he wants to do this is because he wants to get audience members to
Right.
test out.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's totally out of his own personal self interest, right? I mean, again, we've talked about this, but I don't imagine Mitchell to be a narcissist per se, but he is highly self interested, right? He is definitely motivated in his own personal objectives,
Hmm.
um, and he's delusional almost to the point of naive,
Yeah.
but he's not malicious, and he's not like in complete denial of reality like a narcissist is,
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I've never viewed Mitchell as a narcissist, but he certainly does act within his own self-interest. There's no question about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. With all that said, I think for sure he would be the first one to spearhead.
No, absolutely. That's why I say it's Mitchell. And I actually would argue that Calamity is the one who is the least interested, right? Like that's sort of
Why would she be the least interested? Because she's worried about more problems coming to town. Is
yeah,
that why?
absolutely. I mean, Calamity. Well, like, why would a teenage girl be interested in a tourist brochure for a town that she never really intended to stay in, but sort of, wound up here because this is just where adventure, her destiny, has sort of taken her, right?
Mhm.
But also, it's way more funny if our heroine is actually the antagonist of the episode,
Mhm.
because then we can play it against type, right?
Yep.
If Calamity is the one who's resisting this tourism bureau or brochure, then she actually becomes the villain of her own show for one episode. But it's something super lighthearted
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
serious, and ultimately she ends up being right. And I'm spitballing here, so I have no idea what the actual Calamity arises. Sorry, play on words there accidentally.
Mhm.
But of course, everything goes pear shaped, right? I mean, because this is Mitchell who is driving this initiative. So it would absolutely be an utter disaster. And whether Calamity doesn't want to participate because she sees that it's going to become an utter disaster, or because she's just a teenager who can't be bothered,
Mhm.
I don't. It's secondary to the fact that it all becomes absolutely awful, and then Calamity in the last minute has to come in and save the day, right? And that's how we redeem her at the end of the episode, because we don't want to close the episode out with her being a villain, or do we? I mean, maybe we do. I don't know.
No, I think we definitely have to have the redemption factor. Maybe
Right.
she's accidentally right. Maybe it does leave a question mark that she was accidentally right, even though she had all this conviction about being against it, but for some other reason there's a justification for the tourism to be stopped or to close down the center, and then that's enough to temporarily put it on hold or something. I don't know.
I mean, like, what if? I mean, I love the idea that what if, like, the town is like strangely on board with this, and by the end of the first act, they've actually got the brochure done and out and circulating, and then the main conflict ends up being that it draws some sort of interdimensional tourists who are just like the worst litterers. Like, Drago Gorge is just covered in garbage for some reason, right? And so now Calamity is totally against it from the beginning, and then she's completely disinterested because it's like, you guys made this problem. Like, I was against this from the beginning,
Yeah. And now I have to clean up.
And now she has to clean up the mess, because of course she does. It's Calamity we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
And Drago Gorge is like one of the things that I want people to that they ask themselves when they watch the show is like, how did this town not just destroy itself before she showed up, right? Like, every week, Calamity, the town is almost on the absolute utter verge of destruction. I mean, not every episode, but like this, it's a common theme. And Calamity is the one who has to put a stop to it. And how did Drago Gorge ever make it for as far as it did without her?
She showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I think that's that's pretty funny. I mean, like when people are watching the show, sometimes I want them to actually go, "Why am I watching this?" Sometimes, like I do. I know it sounds kind of funny to sort of say that the way, but I don't. I like the fact that there's a lot of questioning going on. I think that's
like, what? Like, yeah,
why are we doing the stream?
Right. I feel like we were really nailing the vibe of the show if the question "what" is something that the audiences ask themselves week after week.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then you just get no habit of just going "what" every week.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, I think that like I think a tourist brochure episode would actually be pretty hilarious, and it would be a great opportunity for sort of an ensemble episode, right?
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, as I draw, I am just laying down. I'm actually just kind of putting down really brief color palette stuff to
no, I noticed that, and I think it's great.
Just to kind of get a feel for.
I love that you turned our skateboarder into a ginger. I think that's hilarious. I think that's great. We need more gingers in Drago Gorge.
I've always seen him that way.
Really, that's great. I never, until you put that. It's interesting too, because the second you made him a ginger, I was, yeah, of course he's a ginger. Like, I didn't even question it for 1 second. So, you clearly knew, and I was just kind of going along for the ride on that one.
It's funny. I mean, I don't know how you are when it comes to, this is an interesting process question, but when it comes to writing, at least for me, when I'm drawing or when I'm doing a sketch, now obviously in blue pencil, I can see what they look like color-wise and stuff. It's just a matter of trying to manifest it at some point, using time to do it. But for the most part, sometimes I do change things. As playing the artsy-fartsy Cody stuff, you do change things up as you go, but there is always a general haze of color and color palette that I'm doing when I'm doing a sketch for us in Calamity Jane. For you, writing wise, when you write up a character, what do you see? Do you see everything as black and white text? Is your world just black and white and subtle grays from the page as you type?
That's right, my cold analytical writer's heart. I don't think in color, I think in Courier New.
Yeah, I'm setting you up.
Yeah, totally. No, actually, it's interesting. I don't, and this is real. I'm not being flippant at all. I I write in emotion. I like, yeah. So when I'm working on anything, Calamity Jane for certainly, but pretty much anything fiction related, I have a real strong sense of the emotions of the characters.
Huh.
So at any moment when I'm writing, if I've done my job as a writer, I know what every character I'm writing is thinking, is feeling, their backstory, everything that brought them to this point, so that when they say, like, that's my bar, like Mitchell, that was a really horrible line to choose. I understand his emotional backstory for why he feels that way. So I don't like when I write a script, I'll sometimes put in loose descriptions on what the characters look like, because visual representation can impact uh, uh, how audiences perceive a character. Like if a character in a TV show is described as always wearing a Kansas City Royals baseball cap, that gives you a little bit of insight about who the character is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, as I'm writing, I'm always imagining their emotional state of mind. So sort of like you have a picture in your head about what they look like. I have a picture in my head of what they're thinking and feeling.
Huh. So sometimes do you remember like I hate to go back. I mean, we obviously love Mitchell a lot, so we always use him.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know why, but we always tend to.
I mean, we love all of our characters, so
Yeah,
that's good. Like they wouldn't be in the show if we didn't love them.
it's funny. Like so, Mitchell, if you recall, I know we probably talked about this. Mitchell was written in the script, and he was a bartender. And at the time, I believe my interpretation of it from reading the script was a classic handlebar mustachioed bartender with the towel over his shoulder and kind of barrel chested. And then I started tweaking it and going, what? No, let's do something different, right? Because the whole Drive Go Goal was different, and you already write enough that's different anyway. So it felt more natural to change him up, and that was completely that decision was just completely just spontaneous.
Sure.
So as a writer, but it changed the way you wrote him too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Well, I rewrote the entire pilot
Yeah.
when we changed his character, because I couldn't. There was none of the original version of that character that could stay, because that original character wasn't Mitchell anymore, and so there was not a single line of dialogue that made sense for our new Mitchell to be saying.
And then this is where the emotion thing comes in too, because then the emotional gearbox changed too.
Yeah.
Once you saw a visual of him, that changed up quite a
Yeah,
bit. I mean,
absolutely. And the visuals can absolutely, and this is where the sort of the give and take comes in, right? If I'm given a character to write for, right? And I mentioned this in the Kansas City Royals. If you give me a character who's wearing a Kansas City Royals hat, unconsciously or not, that impacts sort of my framework. Okay, this guy is at the very least very loyal to Kansas City. He's most likely a baseball fan, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no character in our show that wears a Kansas City Royals ball cap. But yeah, when you gave me those initial rough sketches of Mitchell, and we talked about who he was now, it absolutely changed my emotional headspace, even from the point where we were saying we need to change his character. And yeah, and I spent a lot of time rewriting the script when we made that shift. And if I recall, like Mitchell changed before the show. Mitchell was changed when it was still about Chaos Chameleon. He predates Calamity, I believe.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, you're right, because
And
some of the designs, some of our villains and other characters, I did a pass on them, and they stayed pretty much the same.
yeah.
Was early.
And
Yeah.
the interesting thing, and this goes into the emotional state, it's not their emotions in isolation. It's their emotions as they relate to each other. And there was something about Mitchell's relationship with Calamity that worked so much better than his relationship with Chaos.
Now that you're jogging my memory, I do remember the potential because again, we didn't get that far with chaos.
Right. I mean, it was like Mitchell changed, and then almost very, very quickly afterwards, the show pivoted towards Calamity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
And what was funny about in my head, I was thinking about how Mitchell and Chaos were gonna, bounce off each other chemistry wise, versus him and Calamity. Wait, did I say that right? I originally thought that I was originally, when we first had Mitchell, him bouncing it off of Chaos Chameleon versus later, then we had him versus Calamity. And I think no matter what, he always kind of like his character is so I don't know what word I could use, but his character is so established
Mm-hmm.
that he stays the same no matter who you throw in front of him.
Well, yeah. I mean,
You know,
that's
I
pure
like
Mitchell,
that.
though. Again, he's not a narcissist, but he is heavily self-interested, right? He is
Yeah.
who he is, and this goes into this emotional state. When I write Mitchell, I know in my heart of hearts that Mitchell knows who he is. I mean, he doesn't always like himself, but he knows who he is, right? Like that there is a level of confidence that Mitchell has, deserved or undeserved. But one thing that you can say about him is that he's confident in his self-image. So yeah, of course, whether it was going to be chaos or calamity, Mitchell is Mitchell. But the thing that I found interesting as I wrote the pilot one way with chaos, and then when we went and did another rewrite with calamity, um, it worked better with calamity.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is that Leon Chaos he's so stoic. He was above being affected. He'd seen it all. He had been everywhere. He was the nameless cowboy. I mean, he was very much Clint Eastwood in The Good and the Bad, the Ugly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter how zany Mitchell was going to be. Leon's reaction to that was going to be the same, and there was a lot of comedy potential because no matter what Mitchell did, he could never get a rise out of Leon, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what ended up happening is it was way funnier when it became about Calamity. And because she's a teenager and because she can be affected, it made Mitchell that much more fun because now he sees someone who can be affected, can be annoyed,
Do
right?
you think so? You think that he gets more fun because he's always searching for that audience. The fact that he's getting any attention, even if it's negative attention or annoyed attention, that's a reward for
That's
him.
a win. Yeah, absolutely it is.
The
Yeah.
Pavlovian response because he'll just keep
He
going.
just keeps going, right? And it's also better too because him kind of being frustrated at the brick wall of Leon, it made it about Mitchell in that respect. But Calamity being affected by Mitchell, that makes it more about her, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it actually makes the dynamic, it makes their chemistry better. It makes there's more opportunity for comedy and silliness because Calamity can be affected by Mitchell, whereas Chaos could not be affected by Mitchell. And again, that goes back to sort of those emotional tenors. What are these characters thinking in this scene? What are they feeling in the scene? And what are they thinking and how are they feeling about the other characters in this scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I did that for literally every scene that I write. I mean, that's what you aspire
Yeah.
to, but generally speaking, it is my goal to have a really clear understanding of everybody's state of mind um,
So, I
throughout
mean,
the scene.
this leads to a whole other conversation. I don't know whether with us bumping up to our half hour mark, I don't know whether we could push it off to next week or not. But I want to kind of ask uh, why why is it that it's emotion that's the first thing you're thinking about writing wise? But maybe we could say that for next week. I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a French
Yeah.
exit kind of question, but I mean, we're not bound to 30 minutes. So if we run a little bit over, it's not the end of the world.
Sure.
I don't think that there's any reason beyond that's just what my headspace goes to.
I mean,
Um,
did you? I mean, going into script writing and stuff like that. I mean, I'm assuming you read up on other people that you liked, and you want to. We all try to emulate from people that we admire. And is that their approach?
Not
Um,
necessarily. I mean, my favorite writers don't necessarily approach it from that direction. I approach it from that direction because, um, for whatever reason, I'm less concerned with how a character looks uh, in my show. I mean, in anything I'm writing. I mean, sometimes it matters, but most of the times it doesn't. Um, I think what matters way more is what they're feeling, because to me that's what storytelling is all about: is emotion,
mhm.
conflict resolution, states of mind, learning something about yourself, overcoming obstacles, right? And whether you wear a baseball cap or not, it doesn't matter if the stakes are save the world, right? And so I've found that it's easier to tell stories if I approach it from the standpoint of, um, here's a problem, and here's what my character feels about it, and here's what my character's headspace is for trying to solve the problem.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's why I think I go from that perspective, and I suspect that most writers are like that. I mean, I don't know every writer in the world, but I do know that most writers that I interact with are pretty obsessed with emotion. I mean, like, it is a thing that consumes not only their own personal lives, understanding themselves, understanding why they feel the way that they feel, but understanding why other people feel the way that they feel, right?
Mhm.
Most writers I know love people watching, and I'm no different. I love going to places, and just watching people interact. I was on a
Okay.
date. I was on a date once, um, and we went to like one of these markets. This is pre-pandemic,
Mhm.
down in Atlanta. I think it was either, yeah, it was Ponce City Market, and there's a main floor, and then there's like an atrium above that you can look down into the main floor.
Okay.
And the the date didn't go anywhere ultimately, but we were just chatting, and I mentioned how I like to people watch and I like to make up stories
Hmm.
for the people who are doing this. And there was just this really lonely guy walking around,
Oh,
and I just came up with a story on the spot about
yeah.
how he like met the girl of his dreams, and they agreed to meet at Ponce City Market, and then she stood him up, but he was so desperate for that connection that he just started wandering the market over and over again. And
Wow.
then he started circling the market over and over again, like he was looking for someone. And my date, like 15 minutes later, said, "I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted. Like, that story that you told me about his guy, I'm really worried that that's actually what happened to him
Oh
tonight."
no. Wow.
And so, I mean, every writer I know does that all the time. Like, when they people watch, they tell stories about the people that they're watching, you know. Um,
I think that's a natural. I don't know. Wait, I don't know. As a
and maybe
student,
everybody does it. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm saying writers, but maybe everybody does that.
I mean, for me, I identify with that process readily. I mean, I do that all the time. I'm always, you know, um, being artsy fartsy. You're always out in the world, and for me, I'm always trying to observe people. I'm always people watching too because I want to borrow. I mean, this lineup, all kind of most of them have come from loose abstraction from somebody I've seen, in real life, especially
Hmm.
here in Los Angeles. Just
Sure.
all walks of life, all over the place. I love it.
Sure, I know. Same here. That's one of the things I miss about LA so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so when you're talking about that process, to me, that's much more familiar to me when I'm trying to come up with a character or writing for something. It's always a visual first in my head, like which is
Right.
again where I start playing the colors down. It's
Right.
just sitting in the memory bank there. But when you were talking about how you have two different gears because you're talking about emotional writing versus on the spot writing for a descriptor.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so, I just think I'm obsessed with emotion, like I said, my own internal emotion, and just people's emotional reactions in general. And, and I think that most Western writers are, maybe all writers in the world are, but because Western storytelling is so much about conflict and conflict resolution, maybe that and I'm not an expert, so I'm literally just making shit up right now. But that's what I do. But maybe that just it lends itself to being really obsessed with emotion because of that. Um, but in any case, yeah. So I really love that aspect of humanity, and I think that that's the reason why I approach stories the way I approach them.
Cool.
Yeah. So there you go.
So that being said, I mean, I'm gonna give you. We're have a whole bunch of lineup characters here where you're gonna be writing about them anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Um,
this is fine too. I mean, like having an inspiration point is there's nothing. It makes honestly sometimes it makes it easier. It's like having a writing prompt.
mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I have a couple of ideas already. Like, um, you know, but we can save that. Like we're over at this point, so we can save that for another discussion.
Sure,
But
sure.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think they made some headway as far as getting some rough sketching more done with the townsfolk. I think it's kind of coming along, and yeah, maybe we'll resume this next week. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I think this is looking good. I love seeing the colors. There's something really fun about seeing colors start emerging.
Yeah, there's some worrisome areas I'm worried about. As far as some of these clashy, really bright colors that Gator's got, but that's his character. I don't know if I'm going to change it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fine. Honestly, to a certain extent, I think that that's fine.
Man, look at those hot pink slippers
I
he's
love
got.
it. I love it. A
Uh,
crocodile wearing gaiters.
yeah.
At least in our world. Well, I think that's good enough. We'll let everybody go tonight. But thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you next Monday, as always, at 9:30, or rather, you know what, 6:30 West Coast time, 9:30 East Coast time.
Wow. Thanks.
throw
Thanks
you
for
a, throw
repping.
you throw you a bone there, Mr. James.
Thanks for repping West Coast. Thanks for
Yeah,
giving
I do what I can.
me
I
a
do what I
nod.
can. I don't want to start a war or anything, you know. Um, but all right, everybody, and as always, you can find us on Patreon, um, or look for Calamity Jane Adventure Hour, or just go to calamityjane.rocks. It'll forward you right to our Patreon site. And as always, it's a pleasure having you with us, and we will see you next week. Night, everybody.
Good night.
And that's it.